you know, when you do get to the stage, and now you're judged on an international stage, and you're judged on peers, and it's not just the Irish Times that's, you know, giving you a score at the bottom of it, it's everybody. You know, if you're on social media, you are open to global criticism, you know, from a local audience. It's there, and you know, you have to be, if you're going to be in that world, you have to be open to both sides of it, and that's not necessarily easy all the time.
We don't have Garda escorts or buses down tunnels, you know, dropped at the dressing room door. So they do see us, unfortunately, just arriving and landing into the parking in a stadium, and it can be a fairly daunting walk sometimes, particularly when it's in Croke Park, Páirc Uí Chaoimh, Semple Stadium, somewhere big match days, and you're walking through the fans, no special treatment for the referee trying to get into the dressing room. You know, it can be intense. You know, some comments can be thrown at you, and it's very difficult to block those out. And I don't think fans really appreciate the type of mindset we're trying to get into and to prepare for a huge game like that. And they would have no idea of the pressures that are on you and the stress that you've gone through in the week before. It's no different than a player. You don't want to make a big mistake that's going to cost someone their opportunity to get to an All-Ireland final or to lift Sam Maguire. So the pressure is immense.
All right, we're here with thanks to Gillette. It's all in association with Movember, Effortless Shave, Magnificent Mo, and we've two magnificent guests for you today, David Gough, Gordon Darcy. Good afternoon to you.
Afternoon.
Afternoon.
No Magnificent Mo's is the short story. How was the shave?
It was interesting. First time in 9 years that I've actually put a wet razor to my face.
Really?
So I feel like a bit like a child at the moment.
How did you find it? Was it you typically just use the dry?
Just a trimmer, just like a beard trimmer. Keep it trimmed neatly every couple of days. But yeah, it's a bit tingly there now at the moment.
Styled almost, would you say? Or
it's styled. It's definitely styled. Yeah.
Gordon, you're.
Yeah, I wouldn't be far off, David. I go with long periods without shaving.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the first time probably since I've been in school that I've kind of had a wet shave. So probably a little bit longer than that. And yeah, I was looking at it as I was doing it. I was like, you know, getting a little bit long, and then had to keep going. But yeah, it feels great.
Over the years, you would have grown some very impressive facial hair.
Well, great thing, you could just like leave it off for 2 years and just let it off.
Yeah. You had a right beard at one point, didn't you?
We won the championship in 2014.
What's the thinking that? Is it just like, I'm looking for a change and that's what I'm doing? Or was
no,
it like
we had a bet with Sexton.
Was that right?
Yeah, so we had a bet for the New Zealand game in 2013. Johnny basically had, in his own unique way, had very, very graphically described how much he hated my beard, and he said, let's have a bet for the New Zealand game. We win, I get to shave your beard. I was like, grand. We managed to lose with 20 seconds on the clock, and we're sitting in the hotel having a beer, and he just said, listen, double or quits for the Six Nations. I was like, yeah, grand. So the last minute of the game, Dave Carney, who has one of the best reads ever from a winger, comes in, forces a forward pass, the last play of the game. We win the championship, and on the bus, Sexton takes out the beard trimmer, starts hacking it off on the bus.
Wow.
Yeah. Then I went upstairs for a lovely clean shave.
Yeah, you were like, right, you've hacked it and you lined
yes,
it up.
Yeah, time to get rid of it then.
So you were praying for that. So it was a Carney intercept, was it, or was it a?
No, it was France were attacking, and Dave Carney just had this brilliant read off his wing. It was a 2-on-1, and he just shot in. Brilliant read, huge pressure on the passer. He flipped it forward, and referee called. I think they scored and they called it back for a forward pass. So fine margins.
There's everybody thinking, you're trying to put the fear of God into the opponent by, this sort of grisly exterior, but not a bit of it.
No, No.
We're here with thanks to Gillette, and it all relates to Movember, and a big part of Movember is obviously men's physical health, and a lot to do with men's mental health as well. Talk to us, David. We've had really interesting conversations, you and I, over the last 6 months, particularly about some stuff that's cropped up over the course of GAA, and it does strike me that there are periods in your career, particularly where the heat is on, that it must be at times very difficult to manage your own mental health in some regards, given the spotlight that's on you.
Yeah, it can be quite difficult, particularly in build-ups to All-Ireland finals or high-profile matches, where the talk becomes about the referee, because the very nature of inter-county football, there's quiet dressing rooms, and inter-county managers don't do pre-game media much anymore, so the focus can often turn onto the referee, which happened in 2019, and that was difficult at the time. And it's not something we often speak about mental health with match officials, because match officials aren't very often in the media, so talking about mental health with match officials hasn't come up, but it has recently with the recent events in GAA, which have shone a very negative spotlight on referees and match officials' mental health, particularly with Noel Brick's survey that came out there recently. So it's great to be shining a spotlight on that at the moment.
What do you do around those times to manage it? Like, because there's an unexpected, I suppose there's an expected nature to some of it, because you're coming up to a provincial final or an All-Ireland semi-final or an Ireland final, whatever it might be, and I presume there's an area of sort of expectancy about that. But the unexpected stuff where something happens within a game where you go, geez, I got that wrong, whatever it might be. Have you go-to methods from which you can manage yourself after that? Or
well, initially we'd have visits with the sports psychologist or sports counsellor before the game, visualisation. The interesting thing, you're talking about making a mistake, and we wouldn't know on the field generally whether we've made a mistake or not. We've no VAR, we've no TMO. So if we make a mistake in what the media might think we've made a mistake, on the field we don't actually know about it. We've made the decision, we've seen it live, we've called it, and in our minds we believe it to be true. But it's then when the players start to question it, you might consider, maybe I got that wrong. And it's back to visualisation, some key words that just help you to stay calm and settled, because of all the people on the field, we're the ones that can't lose our composure. So it's hugely important.
What are the key words?
I'll keep those secret.
Are there certain players in those instances where right, if he's kicking up a fuss or he's reacted in that way, there might be something here more than I'm thinking at that minute? Or
there are, because you get so used to dealing with the inter-county players week in, week out. The ones that would approach you to ask a question, or the ones that would really complain. And the ones that are really complaining, you might think, well, maybe I've made a blatant error here. But it's man management and control, and it's a lot of communication, being calm. And sometimes it's not exactly what you're saying. What's more important is what the player is hearing.
So let's say something happens in the first half. At half-time, are you is there a method for you to find out at half-time, or will typically somebody come knocking? Or
No, the only time I've seen someone come knocking was with the Hawkeye incident in Croke Park this year in the All-Ireland semi-final with Galway and Derry, but we'd have no outside influence at any stage in the match. It's just the 8 match officials back to the dressing room. It's just the 8 of us. We've no television, no communication through the stands back out onto the field. We're completely left alone.
There isn't going to be, I suppose I'm getting at, nobody's going to say in the second half, right, he's making amends there for something that happened, because
you wouldn't know, you wouldn't have found out.
Do you look at the GAA stuff, like, given your background in the sport you're in, your smile already, are you looking at, in terms of, because we've chatted before about, like, is rugby the best route to go down? And you've said, no, actually, in terms of the professionalism and all that, we're fine where we're at. Do you look at other sports and go, geez, I have to say, they really should do it this way in terms of the rugby relationship between refs and players?
The natural relationship, the obvious one is football, where you're just like, how is that allowed? It's so heavily regulated in so many ways, and it just seems to me sometimes just carte blanche by the referees. You like, some to the extent you there, why would you be a referee? Sometimes there is an element of the community piece around the referees and stuff, and I think that just gets magnified as the further up they go. But then it's like throwing something in when it all goes well, and if you have a good game and you're happy with it, it's everybody's very, very complimentary. But it's just, so unfortunately the negative stuff gets massively probably gets more airtime than it possibly should. It's very very Irish trait, where we always focus on the bad things. You would like to see, like, this, the respect thing in, as somebody who grew up playing rugby, and GAA was hurling to a certain point, and then just rugby. You were basically told from day dot, you do not say anything to the ref, and they have this kind of I suppose up on the pedestal kind of a thing. You don't, it's yes sir, no sir type of approach to the referees, and I think it's a cultural thing. But I think it's important, particularly in say GAA, you don't throw all the good stuff in with the moments of madness, and they are moments of madness, whereas the majority of the GAA plays off with little or no issues, and I suppose the crack between the referee and the players at club level, inter-county level does happen as well, and they're quite engaged in that.
There's an incident-driven nature almost to some of the analysis, isn't there? Like in a way that certainly not unique to here, and is probably most amplified in the Premier League, particularly. Some of the UK media tends to this monster spotlight on an incident. That's probably easier for journalists, pundits, for everybody to get on board with, as opposed to actually sitting down and looking at the meat and drink of a game and where it went right and wrong, which must be a frustration, I presume, for that element.
Yeah, it's hugely frustrating if you've gone through maybe 70 minutes of an inter-county match, maybe 10 minutes additional time, and they're focusing on one incident, and there's a huge discourse around that incident, particularly with pundits who are coming from playing backgrounds who aren't as well versed in the rules as the referees, and it can be frustration that there's a lack of knowledge or an ignorance around what we're trying to do or implement and what the pundits are talking about, and that one focus on one negative perceived aspect of the game compared to maybe 75 minutes of a fantastic performance is hugely frustrating.
I think there was a couple of years ago, Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher, I think it was the two of them, went and did a course. Did they?
They were calling offside on bits and pieces, and in a training ground in the UK, and it was very funny watching them trying to officiate. Like two of the
they weren't getting it right.
No, they weren't getting it right. No.
Have you ever thought about maybe one sort of slightly more creative way about going to this? Would we bring them inside and say, here, listen, this is how this all works, and
I've often gone to speak to inter-county teams and got them to take out their mobile phones, sign up to a URL, and put a kind of a pop quiz of 10 questions on rules up on the board, put up the most obscure ones that I could possibly find, and get the guys to answer, and the answers come up live on the screen, and it's hilarious. I mean, you're talking below 30% most of the time.
Really?
Yeah, and it's interesting. The majority of inter-county players playing football maybe 20, 30 years of their life have never read the rules of the game.
And then you add in the heat of an inter-county game, or like a final, or like the adrenaline and all that stuff. It's
in the heat of the battle, they can just lose composure sometimes, and it all gets lost.
Even just the bit that I always find, it's one of the few games where you pretty much have a friend in battle the whole way around, and if you get the guy who's in your ear, and you had a bad day, there's so much about GAA is around that sportsmanship. And I would assume some people are better at it than others, and there's players who are much more talented, and then there's the cute lads that understand how to play a person as much as thing, and that's when that is if you take that away from GAA, I think you will lose a huge amount for it. And now that's not condoning that it will inevitably boil over, and rugby has its own issues that we're trying to stamp out certain behaviours in it. So there's always going to be things that you're always looking to fix in any game. But I couldn't imagine trying to be in the midfield and either having to follow somebody and be talking to them the whole way.
Enough to be doing you always struck me as somebody who quietly went around about their business. That you were. I mean, it's a different dynamic obviously given rugby, but were you ever on the wrong side of a referee or?
Not really. We're usually at the bottom of a ruck, so I don't really was never a captain or vice anyone that needed to be talking to a referee. You might occasionally let her roar when you see a penalty, or if you're trying to influence them, but not directly. You might kind of the referee might be standing there, and you kind of letting her roar about hands on, or he's off his feet, something like that at the breakdown. Or you might back when you might be scanning to see which side of the ruck the referee was on, and then just walk over somebody.
Yeah. And funny, because it brings us nicely on. At that time, conversations around mental health in Ireland and around sport in Ireland were pretty much non-existent. They weren't a thing. And you had obviously I don't know how you describe it now, but certainly an interesting early journey into rugby, and speed wobble, let's call it at the start. How was your, and I don't want to be exaggerating the point or putting words in your mouth, but your mental health around all that was going on? You were a young man, obviously you were trying to find your way in the world and things hadn't exactly panned out as you might have liked.
Yeah, I think I think I was a pretty resilient person, but definitely and kind of that story's been told to death with Matt Williams, where I think we're going into negotiate a contract and he's telling me they're going to let me go, and then at the end of the thing he says, "Listen, we'll give you 4 weeks to save your contract." It's like, grand. So went away, very confused, very frustrated, lots of emotions. 19 years of age, I've been at a World Cup, cap for Ireland, and a coach is telling me, "Oh, you're done here," and then throwing me a lifeline. So to be honest, I didn't know how to cope with that, and I really didn't know where to go, and was kind of a little bit lost. And I remember chatting to my old man, and my old man's quite a stoic individual. Doesn't say a huge amount, but usually when he does say something, there's a bit of weight in behind it. And he just said, because Matt had kind of said, like, you're not really pulling your weight. You're not really, you're playing well in games, but you're not doing much. And he just said, do you think there's anything in what he said? And I was like, oh, so that starts the ball rolling, and then you go, right, now I've got a little bit of information here. I need to get more information. I started asking a few people I trusted, what their view on me is. And this is, I think, perception is a really important thing in all of this, because we didn't have social media back then. I think Facebook probably wasn't even around.
Bebo or something probably.
Bebo. Definitely showing your age there. So I didn't I didn't have any idea of how my teammates really viewed me, and I asked a few of them, and it was absolutely brutal, because I thought I was kind of tipping along maybe 5, 6 out of 10, and they were just like, don't trust you in the field, you're late to training, you're overweight, all this stuff. And I was like, oh my God, again, more information going in. I didn't know how to start processing it, and eventually started asking for help with people that could help me with the fine-tuning stuff. Like say Jason Cameron was brilliant, the S&C guy at the time. He was like, listen, we'll get that. I went down to Andrea Cullen, she was a dietitian down in Limerick, and went into the coach and said, what do you want from me? But that's only three aspects. So the next thing is up here. How do you get ready to perform? And that was probably my issue, was like, I wanted to be better, I just didn't have the tools to do it. And that's when I probably met Enda McNulty, and that was all about controlling what goes on in your, not controlling what goes on in your head, but accepting what goes on in your head, and then figuring out what's your best way forward. So I had 2 very simple goals at the end of that period, which was, one was I wanted my peers to respect me, and the second one was, if I got a chance to play for Ireland again, I'd be ready. And yeah, it worked out reasonably well. But that, and then you move into the next period of that, which is when you do get to the stage, and now you're judged on the international stage, and you're judging peers, and it's not just Jerry Thornley in the Irish Times that's giving you a score at the bottom of it. It's everybody's. If you're on social media, you are open to global criticism, from a local audience, but it's there, and you have to be, if you're going to be in that world, you have to be open to both sides of it, and that's not necessarily easy all the time.
It worked out way more than reasonably well, just to pull you up on that. What after the 4 weeks, what happened? Did you sit down again, or?
Yeah, well, after the 4 weeks, they said, "Listen, we'll give you a contract." They gave me a pretty crappy contract, and I signed it.
Well, you were delighted, probably, were you? Or no,
it wasn't about the money. It was now at that time it was about getting undoing the damage that I had inflicted on myself. So it's like you know this with being a principal. I'm not saying you would label anybody in the way I'm going to label myself, but you get the reputation as a messer overnight, and it takes you. It took me 3-4 years to do, because every time you slip up, people look at you and they wonder, oh, is this the old Gordon? How's he going to react to you slipping up? Because it's not that. It's.
You mean internally?
Yeah, internally. Yeah, internally with your peer group, your coach, looking at you. Consistency. Eddie O'Sullivan, the coach at the time, and he's like, "You're too inconsistent for me." It's very simple. It's not nice to hear, but it's very simple.
Well, it did strike me as you were saying some of that stuff. Geez, hearing your peers say that type of stuff to you at that age, it's
brilliant though. This is what I'm saying about perception. How people understand you, how they perceive you. If I don't get that information, how can I possibly go forward? How can I live in this little vacuum without any sort of self-awareness? Could easily send you the other way, of course. You could have easily got spat out and said that there's too much here. But isn't that a good thing then? Because you're not getting crushed under the pressure of getting crushed under that level of pressure. If it's not for you, it's not for you. I enjoyed it. Like in some ways, like after hearing it, people telling me, what was one of them? It's like, there's more to being a professional than getting paid. One of them was like, you showing up here every day, you're either going to be a positive or negative, and you not being a negative. So you showing up and not screwing up is not good enough. You've got to be your best every day. And you're just like, oh, this is actually, I could have done with this when I left school instead of wasting 24 months. One last one on this one I just want to ask you both about is like the concept of turning up to a ground, at the Viva last weekend, there's 45,000 people there, or there's 80,000 people plus, and All-Ireland final day, whatever it might be, and touching on some of the areas we touched on earlier on in relation to the, response to stuff that happens on the pitch for good or for bad. Do you think that the fans have any sort of concept of the pressure, I suppose, it's on, let's say, a referee where you're in the middle of the pitch and, I think a lot of people maybe have the perception that you've just turned up, you're here, you're going to referee the game, so there's nobody else to do it, whereas like your journey couldn't be any more different than that. Yeah,
I suppose we have different journeys to a stadium, Gordon. Just that mine, I have to plan myself. I'm driving in my own car with my own umpires. We don't have Garda escorts or buses down tunnels, dropped at the dressing room door. So they do see us, unfortunately, just arriving and landing into the parking in a stadium. And it can be a fairly daunting walk sometimes, particularly when it's in Croke Park. Páirc Uí Chaoimh, Semple Stadium, somewhere big match days, and you're walking through the fans, no special treatment for the referee, trying to get into the dressing room, and some comments can be thrown at you, and it's very difficult to block those out. And I don't think fans really appreciate the type of mindset we're trying to get into to prepare for a huge game like that, and they would have no idea of the pressures that are on you and the stress that you've gone through in the week before. There's no different than a player. You don't want to make a big mistake that's going to cost someone their opportunity to get to an All-Ireland final or to lift Sam Maguire. So the pressure is immense.
What about your experience when you were playing? Was there that, the fans are on your back about something, or look, it can go both ways. They're delighted with you and they're cheering.
Sure, listen, for the first 11 years of my career, we didn't really win anything, so it was kind of a continual frustration. I think the commentary from somebody in a stand, usually over the heads, one too many beers, and I think what happened with social media is the one that's added this kind of, it's almost like a disassociation to the comment you're making. Oh, it's not really going to David because I put it on social media, but he's never going to see that. I'm just throwing something into the ether, and I think you can be fairly confident that every player, every ref, everything, all that commentary filters back to them in some shape, way, or form. It might not be the person directly seeing it, but it might be their wife, might be their partner, it could be their kids, whoever it is that comes back in. And that's the bit you kind of struggle with, because unfortunately that's become the barometer of public opinion, and you just kind of wish that you're there going, listen, if you wouldn't say it on Grafton Street to somebody if you met them, don't stick it in a message, because that's the stuff that can really get into your head and potentially doing a lot of damage.
Self-doubt and
that's the bit, one of the things that became very clear to me over a long period of time was around this narrative that you create for yourself, and sometimes it can be that confirmation bias of where you have a feeling of something like, oh, I'm not playing particularly well, and then you're only aware of the negative commentary that comes your way, and you're just like, oh, and then you get very down on yourself. And how you get it, and how to get out of that is, can be quite hard. And again, I love Enda's eternal optimism, and he's like a like an energy drink when you meet him. He's just a tonic for life, and he's just there. Well, just flip that in his head, and believe in yourself, and then find the confirmation bias of the positive stuff. That's really hard to do, but it takes practice. It's like anything, and I don't think, you talked about strategies and stuff like that, talking about how you deal with mental mental awareness and things like that. It takes practice, and that's something we're getting comfortable about talking about it, not necessarily because you'll be the only one who knows. Do you look after yourself? Do you check in? Do all these little things with yourself? But it's pretty important.
We're here with Gordon Darcy and David Gough, and it's all with thanks to Gillette and all in association with Movember, Effortless Shave, Magnificent Mo. Gordon, David, thanks a million for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.